Hello, everyone, and today we're studying Parashat Tetzaveh, the book of Exodus, chapter 27, verse 20. ואתה תצווה את בני ישראל. This is Parashat Tetzaveh, but this is also the week that is called the Shabbat. The coming Shabbat is called Shabbat Zakhor. So on this Shabbat, this coming Shabbat, we open two Torahs, one to read the whole Parashat Tetzaveh, and then the last reading will be Parashat Zakhor. Zakhor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what the Amalek did to you. And it is very important that these two parashot coincide because Shabbat Zakhor is always a Shabbat before the holiday of Purim. So let's just try to understand how these two parashot coincide. It's not always that Shabbat Zakhor is on Parashat Tetzaveh, many times, but not always. However, there's another thing that is very important because if you realize what's going around us, anybody who's aware to the news, the world is becoming more and more chaotic. And the question is, how is this connected to the war of Amalek, which is even a worse version than Armageddon? This is the topic that we are facing an amazing period in history in which a lot of stuff that we thought, that's how it's going to be forever, like world order, trust among people, among nations, some values of respecting human rights. It's all falling apart. It's all becoming so chaotic that you don't even understand what's going on. And I think that the messages of Parashat Tetzaveh and Zakhor can help us understand the war, the great war we are facing, not just facing in the future, facing in the past and the present. The war, as I said many times, as it's written in the books, the war had already begun. The fact that people are feeling so much distrust, confusion, more than that, like very mixed emotions of insecurity and upset, that is part of the war we are facing. And of course, we have the healing for that in the Zohar, explaining how these two parashot help us to understand what's going on. So first of all, start with the Parashah, Tetzaveh. And Parashat Tetzaveh is a continuation of the previous parashot. What did we have in the previous parashot? We had the Exodus. And the Exodus is in the book of Exodus, but in Hebrew, it's called Shemot, the book of names. And we explained in the beginning of Exodus that when we are talking about the book of names, we're talking about the war for freedom. That's what Exodus is about. The human war for freedom. True freedom is not just that you have officially freedom in the Constitution. That does not guarantee freedom. You can have freedom in many constitutions, but today you see how we can have beautiful constitution, but you ask the average person, do you feel that you live in a free society? Do you feel that the people that you pay them taxes, they really use the taxes in order to improve your personal freedom of achieving your own happiness, personal freedom in achieving your own manifestation of your dreams, economically, education-wise, access to whatever freedoms that you need, it looks like people are starting to be more and more aware that there is an abuse of human rights and almost anywhere around the globe. And it's very hard to find people who do feel trust with their chosen leadership, as we're going to call it. Okay, so what is the connection? The road to freedom is connected, as we learn at the beginning of the book of Exodus, is connected to the person's self-liberating consciousness when we really connect to the names of God, that the names of God do not define God. We have to remember when we are talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when we are talking about monotheism, when we are talking about the God of Genesis, the God of the five books of Moses, we're talking about an infinite power that created the universe and sustains every part of the universe, every split second uh, as we speak, from the beginning to the end. Now, when we are talking about this God, which is infinite with its power and love and bliss flowing to all of humanity and not just humanity, every particle of this universe, you cannot give a name to a force that is infinite because a name means definition. And definition comes from the word finite. And if the creator is infinite, which means he has no definition, therefore he is nameless. So what names are we talking about? And here the book of Exodus is teaching us that the names of God that are being mentioned in the book of Exodus, this is not God, but this is defining our limited perception of God. And since our perception of God is limited, we have to purify our perception. And that means change the way we name God. So we have names for God, names that show us that God is a source of judgment and limitation. On the other hand, source of endless infinite light and love and bliss. And there is the God of balance. We're not talking about multiple gods, but we're talking about the way we perceive God. Now, it's very hard for a human being who's a finite being in time and space, who is also very, very limited in his or her state of mind, consciousness, perception of reality. And whatever we perceive today, we won't perceive tomorrow. But we have to understand that our perception of reality is in our hand, which means as long as we are aware that the perception of reality belongs to us and only to us. And since our perception of reality dictates how we perceive God, how we perceive his flow of the life force into everything around us, that's what the study is about. It's about rewiring our brain daily through daily meditation, study, awareness, whatever we do, prayer, in order to purify, crystallize our perception of the endless love of God towards his creation. And what the Torah is teaching us through those parashot of the Exodus is not just about an historical event that the academy is totally disputes its existence. Why? Because an historical event of such magnitude is challenging whatever we understand about life. Here we have a fantastic intervention in the course of history, in which a nation of slaves that was not rare. Nations have been slaved by other nations for eons. It's like if you look at the ancient world's economy, without enslaving people, the economy would fall apart. And, and the economy was based on slaves. Rome was based on slaves. It's like every great uh, uh, commerce in the ancient times, even till late, when we're talking about the Civil War in America, big part of the American economy was based on slave labor. Okay, so this happened only 200 years ago, 100 less than 200 years ago. So we are talking about the fact that even today, people are enslaved if they know it or not. What was the fight? And we explained that the fight was to create a state of mind within the Israelites, a state of mind that makes them have what we call emunah. Emunah means faith. It means connection. It means adhesion to the powers of God. It means trust. When a person is connected, he can override all the impression of slavery that imprinted in him through everything around, because we live in a world that the forces of slavery are so powerful because, you know, big nations, big forces, big economy, big companies, they all thrive over people's obedience. People, people work. And most of the time, unfortunately, this is based on enslavement. So the process of the Exodus, whoever noticed through my lectures from the beginning of the book of Exodus, is all about the deliverance of the consciousness of I am a free human being, and my freedom is totally connected to my perception of godliness. And the moment I really perceive the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the monotheistic God of Mount Sinai, that God that really created each one of us in his image, and therefore no one has any right to enslave another human being because he is also created in God's image. And we just read it in Parashat Mishpatim a few weeks ago, stealing a human being and selling him, this is death sentence because, but I didn't murder him. Yeah, if a person was created in the image of God, making someone a slave, that's that taking his or her independence. That's taking the image of God from them. That's like murder. So Mount Sinai revelation, we mentioned, is a tipping point in the history of humanity. It's when the first time in the history of since the creation, a whole nation realizes freedom, the freedom to think, to love, to be, to have an idea, to have an opinion, to express an opinion, to be different without being afraid that somebody will arrest you or kill you because you have a different ideology than somebody else. And as we said, that the Zohar is teaching us on Mount Sinai, there were 600,000 people. Everybody heard the law, the whole thing, not just what we call, what's on the two tablets, 10 utterances, 10 advices. No, it continues. The Mount Sinai revelation continues by the laws of behavior of humanity, human being to another human being, Parashat Mishpatim. It continues last week in Parashat Terumah. the ability of a human being and the duty of a human being to raise any part of reality. It's a house, it's a field, it's gold, it's silver, it's wood, anything you own, you can raise it. That's Truma, raising the hay, raising existence into divinity, into magic. We were created as magical creatures. And therefore, we need magic. Magic is part of our lives. But what is magic? There's all kinds of magic. There's only one magic that really raises. That is the magic of bringing in by thought, by intention, by meditation, to bring in God's light from the highest realms into this physical, mundane dimension. How do you do that? This is what we should study daily, hourly, because that is what is going to redeem us. The moment we realize that we can inject magic into everything. You know, people feel that when you cook with love, it has a different taste. The cooking, the food, when you prepare whatever with the state of mind of love and awareness, you can, as a human being, be the high priest of your own life. And the peak of that is Parashah Tetsaveh, this weekly reading. And how does it start? Ve'ata tetzaveh bnei Israel, and you should command the children of Israel. What is the commanding over here? The commanding is to take pure olive oil, lema'or, for light, lehalot ner tamid, to raise an eternal candle. So there's a trick of words over here. Whoever understands the magical words of the Torah through the Kabbalistic study, we know that the candle is always the bridge between the mundane, the physical, and the spiritual, the divine. When we want to connect to a higher dimension, we light the candle. It's something that many civilizations do that. There's no argument about it. You want to connect to a higher realm. You want to connect to a higher spirit. You want to connect to a soul of somebody else. You light a candle. You want to connect to Shabbat. Nobody can see the Shabbat entering to the world, but it's written in many places. Shabbat enters on so and so Friday afternoon. Nobody can see the Shabbat entering, but everybody knows you want to capture the entering of that divine spirit of Shabbat. You light Shabbat candles. So the candle is the connection. And a candle is also the word candle in Hebrew, ner. It's initials of nefesh, ruach, neshama. The three levels, main levels of the human soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama. And that's ner. So what is the commanding over here? That we humans, can command the divine, the spiritual light into the physical, the mundane, the whatever is meaningless. We can take, as we read last week, gold, silver, uh, wood, and any kind of other materials and make them a temple. So, but making a temple, that's an event that happened some 33 centuries ago. We're not supposed to build another temple like this or tabernacle. And as I said last week, let's say Mashiach comes today, the Messiah is coming today, and we start to build a temple in Jerusalem, the third temple. Are we going to go to Parashat Tetsaveh for the order? No. There are other books. Why? Because the temple in Jerusalem was not built by the same instructions written in Parashat Tetzaveh. That was for the portable temple the Israelites carried in the desert, and they used that portable temple till King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem about 3,000 years ago. So are we going to rebuild the tabernacle? No. It's going to be a bigger, more powerful uh, temple because it's going to serve the whole world. And you need something big enough to be the kind of the center point of the world attention. So why do we read Parashat Tetzaveh again? Because the words of Parashat Tetzaveh are basically training our mind, our thoughts, our heart to be able to bring the divine into everything we do. And we read a lot about it in Parashat Vayakhel, which, for instance, is teaching us that when the people making the different parts of the tabernacle, like I said, the women who were weaving the uh, the cloth that covered the big parts of the tabernacle, and they were weaving, and while they were weaving and knitting and whatever, they used to say, this is for the parochet. This is for the Mishkan. And by saying that with intention, with desire, with concentration, they raised the frequency of the physical material and made it connected to higher dimensions. So, yes, you can see a physical thing, a tabernacle, a temple, and it has two dimensions, the divine and the physical. The part that we can see, think about, measure with our senses, and the part that we know it's there, we can feel that. By the same way, we have a human body and we need a human soul. Without the soul, the body is just lifeless. Without the body, the soul cannot manifest itself. Why manifesting? Because being able to blow life into physical material and turn it into a magical event, this is the destination of every human being. However, that brings us to Parashat Zakhor. And Parashat Zakhor is teaching us about uh, something very sad. We read Parashat Beshalach. The Israelites, they leave Egypt. They have this amazing, unbelievable, impossible, but it happened, which means logically impossible, but you know how many things are impossible. We say that's impossible after it happened already. But it happened. The splitting of the Red Sea did happen. Otherwise, I spoke about it before, who started the lie and when? And since you know how argumentative Jews are, you would find traces in history if there was a lie and this lie was injected in a point in history, you would find traces of the discussion and the arguments about, you know, who brought that lie upon us. And however, how can he explain that for 33 centuries, millions and millions and millions and millions of Israelites repeat every day, not just on Passover. The Hebrew prayer books repeats daily the story of the Exodus and the story of the splitting the Red Sea, again and again and again. Mentioning that, why? Because in order to awaken inside each one of us that trust that miracles do happen. Miracles are possible. Miracles are part of our daily life. And therefore, the Arizal is saying that in the morning prayer, you have a psalm that is called Mizmor LeTodah, a psalm for thanksgiving, that we say daily because every day we have miracles happening to us that save our lives. And we are not even aware of them. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So in order to be okay, we say that Psalm, Thanksgiving Psalm daily, to thank for all of those miracles that happened to us, that if we notice and if we didn't notice, but they do happen. Now, so after the Exodus, we have today a whole culture. It's called academia, the Ministry of Education. It's called the media. It's called a whole civilization who denies the Exodus, who denies Mount Sinai revelation, who denies the splitting of the Red Sea. And there's a name for that because a little bit after the splitting of the Red Sea, it already started. And it started in Exodus 17, verse 8. ויבוא Amalek וילחם עם ישראל ברפידים. And Amalek came to fight with Israel in Refidim. Refidim is the name of a place. ויאמר משה אל יהושע, so Moses says to Joshua, בחר לנו אנשים וצא לכם בעמלק. Choose people, should be the most righteous people, so we can go and fight the Amalek. Now remember, the Amalek, they were professional, was a whole nation of robbers. They were professional fighters. They were bred to be warriors since childhood. Okay? The Israelites were slaves for centuries. They did not hold weapon for centuries. Now they have to fight those professional fighters. So, and he says, take those righteous people, וצא יילחם בעמלק, and go fight them, fight the Amalek. מחר אנוכי ניצב על ראש הגבעה, ומטה אלוהים בידי. And Moses said, I will stand on top of the hill, holding the staff of the Lord in my hand. And Joshua did what Moses said. So Moses, Aaron, and Hur stood on top of the hill. That's verse 10, chapter 17. And then there's a weird story. והיה כאשר ירים משה ידו וגבר ישראל. So when Moses raises his hands, Israel was winning the war. When he brought his hands down, then the Amalek was winning the war. וידי משה כבדים, and the hands of Moses were heavy. ויקחו אבן ישימו תחתיו. So they put a stone and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur were holding Moses' hands upwards. One from this side, the other from the other side. And Vahi Yadav Emunah, and his hands were Emunah, faith, connection. Ad Bo Shemesh, there's a lot of hidden codes over here. Finally, Joshua won. And then God says, and that's why we read Amalek's story this Shabbat. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, verse 14, כתוב זאת זיכרון בספר, write that as a memory in the book. ושים באוזני יהושע, and put it in the ears of Joshua. כי מחו אמחה את זכר עמלק מתחת לשמיים, because I will surely erase, but terrible translation, מחו, I will erase, אמחה, it's like I will erase, and it's like saying I will erase the memory of Amalek from under the sky. Why the memory? Why not the Amalek? ויבן משה מזבח ויקרא שמו אדוני ניסי. And Moses builds an altar and he calls it Adonai Nisi. God is my miracle. ויאמר כי יד על כסיה מלחמה לאדוני בעמלק. And this is one of the most important codes for understanding the war we are at. כי יד על כסיה, there's a hand on the throne of Yah, one of the names of God, Milchama leHashem, a war of God, ba'Amalek, against Amalek, midor dor, from one generation to another. What does that mean? We can go through that for a long time, but to make it simple, the Zohar says in Parashat Beshalach, why it says dor dor, for generation to generation? And it says dor, generation, without the letter vav. Should be said dor, daled vav resh. And it says only daled resh. Ktiv chaser, like the vav, you can read it. Dor, but the vav, the O in the middle is missing. Why is it missing? Lirmoz al darei mala v'darei mata. This is to hint about the dwellers of the above world and the world below. שאינם שלמים כל עוד עמלק קיים. They are not complete. They are not a whole as long Amalek exists. אמר רבי יהודה, Rabbi Yehuda said, בכל הדורות הבאים, in all the coming generations, לעולם אין לך דור שאין בו מזרע הרע של עמלק. Every generation has the seed, the evil seed of Amalek. והקדוש ברוך הוא מתגרה בהם מלחמה. And God is making war against Amalek. עליהם נאמר, יתמו חטאים מן הארץ. About them it says, and the sinner and the sins will be extinguished from the earth, in Psalms. מן הארץ, from the earth, in this, בעולם הזה ובעולם הבא, in this world and in the upper world. באותו זמן נאמר, ברכי נפשי את אדוני. And then we can say, let my soul bless God. So what is the secret over here? Amalek, why do we have to fight Amalek? And it says in Parashat Tetsaveh, ki asher karcha b'derech, that made you. Now, what's karcha? Karcha in Hebrew, and the commentators are kind of this, it's not a dispute, but one Hebrew word could have many meanings. And the meaning is, some of the meanings are, karcha comes from the word kara, mikre. That's some opinion of some commentators. What is Amalek? Amalek exists in every generation. It's not just people, it's a state of mind of each human being. What state of mind? What kind of people? Whenever you see the miracle, you realize in awe that this universe is all connected, there will be that thought. Those people will say, no, this is only an accident. It happened it's just a matter of probability. Karcha. That's one meaning of karcha b'derech. What does it mean? Made you feel that everything is by probability, by coincidence, even though the word coincidence, when two things coincide, it just happened without any meaning. No meaning, no connection. Whatever happens, it's just a matter of coincidental evolution. So when you have those moments of awe, those moments of epiphany, that you feel the presence of the divine in the event in your life, comes the Amalek to tell you, no, that's just a coincidence. It has no meaning. And as I said, it could be a person, an institution, or thought deep inside yourself. But some other commentators are saying karcha comes from the word lekarer, kerarcha, which means when you are in the excitement of devotion, of connecting to the magic divinity of the universe and the creation, and you feel a meaning, you feel a goal, you feel this passion in your bones and muscles and veins, that is something you can get burned with, to do something with real concentration and passion and direction. And there will be that thought or person or institution that will tell you, no, no, cool down. You should chill. Cool down. Nothing happened. It's nothing. You're too hot about it. You're too excited about it. You're excited about nothing. Nothing. Zero. Nothing really happened. It is meaningless. There's no God. There's no godliness. There's nothing. And I'm asking a question. It is the last few centuries. I think it's even longer than that. Amalek during the Dark Ages, I said it many times, took the power, the feature that religions created a false God, a God of vengeance, a God of partition, separation, classification, who's more important, who's closer to him, who's next, exactly like in the most stupid cult possible. Why I'm saying stupid? Because if you really think about what's happening in cults, it's people willingly giving up their freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. They're simply giving up their own most valuable asset, their freedom. So why do people do that? Because they think it's something divine to follow for a higher purpose. And that is pure Amalek, because people who are cult survivors, they look at, it could be, I had a student, she was a history professor, and she said, among history professors, we have a saying, what's the difference between a cult and a religion? And the answer is 100 years. If it exists more than 100 years, it gets to be respected as a religion. Why do religions have so much respect? Power. Simply power. Because the religions of the Dark Ages were about believe in a false God. How do I know? It was all about politics. It was all about it. We still have very big part of the world that teach about a God that claims to be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God that created the universe, the God of the Bible, the God of Moses, the God that took the Israelites out of Egypt, split the Red Sea, revealed himself on Mount Sinai, and gave freedom to the people, to the whole world on Mount Sinai. And they take that God and they use his name to enslave people, to abuse people's most holiest rights, and to empty the idea of holiness and divinity and instill instead do's and especially don't do's. You're not allowed, you're not allowed, you're not allowed. You don't deserve it, you feel shame. You should feel shame, and so on. That was the God of the Dark Ages. But that God, after the Dark Ages, because the breaking of the boundaries, humanity started, the age of Aquarius came in full trust, and those walls of the dungeon of religion started to fall apart, and people started to discover freedom, to discover that the world is much bigger than the dungeon that the religions of the Dark Ages created. But then came another Amalek. That was Amalek. The religion of the Dark Ages was pure Amalek. It was all about separation and all about taking from people the right for the image of God inside them. That was Amalek. It made you cold, not to be really excited about anything of holiness and godliness. Why? It's not for you. It's for holier people, not for you. Okay? Same kind of trick of abuse of rights that happened in the ancient world through the polytheistic system. to idol worshiping. Now came another religion. When that happens, now came the religion that was a real manifestation of Amalek, investing huge amount of time and energy and money in proving there is no God, there was never a God, God does not exist, it's just fake. And my question is, if this is a story, why is it that the most popular movies and books in our generation, in bigger and bigger numbers, are fantasy, speaking about magical heroes, magical romanticism? Everything is magic in those books. Why? Because we are magical creatures. And the only way we can redeem ourselves is acknowledging that magic. So the whole academia is Amalek, totally Amalek, with vengeance, with hatred. And you see Amalek when you see the vicious desire to destroy any kind of pure love to God, to humanity. No, there's vengeance and rage, fighting. It looks like fighting for people's rights, but you can't fight for human rights and holiness when you hate, when you're angry. And Parashat Tetzaveh, our Parashah, is very clear about it. One of the important articles in this Parashah and this is Zohar Perusha Sulam, verse 51. Et Chag HaMatzot tishmor. You should observe the holiday of the matzot, the unleavened bread. רבי יהודה פתח, רבי יהודה opened, חידלו לכם מן האדם אשר נשמה באפו. This is Psalms 81. Avoid that person that has a soul in his nostril. That is a simple translation. כי במה נחשבו, כי what does he count for? הייקה או כמו, we already explained that verse. אבל מה יחידלו לכם מן האדם? What does it mean avoid the person? וכי עזר לי לברנש להתמנע משאר בני אנשה? Does the Torah or Psalm warning people to stay away from other human beings? אופי נון נמי לגבי השתכחון מנשה דלי קרבון אילן באילן העלמין? אלא הוא כמו במאן דהשכים לפתחה דחברי למאב לישלם. דכתיב מברך רעהו בקול גדול בבוקר השכם קללה תחשב לו, ואף על גב דחולה שפיר. אבל מה יחידו לכם מן אדם אשר נשמה באפו? So the Zohar goes into discourse about the different commentaries for that verse, but then he comes into the real conclusion. Verse 53. כי כשברא הקדוש ברוך הוא את האדם, when God created Adam, עשה אותו בצורה עליונה ונפח ברוח קדוש. He made him in the form of the divine and blew into him a Holy Spirit. הכלול משלושה כמו שהעמדנו. That is included of three, as we said, nefesh, ruach, neshama, the three levels of the soul. והנשמה היא למעלה מכולם, and the neshama is higher than all three. Nefesh is the lowest, spirit, ruach, is the second level, neshama is the highest. שהיא כוח עליון לדעת ולשמור מצוות הקדוש ברוך הוא. What is the power of the soul? The soul can observe. Observe means to be aware of, to focus on, and to keep a connection. Establish connection. ואם מכניס נשמה הקדושה היא בעבודה אחרת. However, if the person takes his own holy soul that he possesses, and he enters that holy soul into another worship, that worship that defiles it, desecrates it, יוצא מעבודת ריבונו, and he's unsubscribing, disconnecting himself from the worship of his real own master, משום ששלושת כוחות אלו כולם אחד, נפש, רוח, נשמה, משתתפים יחד. So how do you know that somebody basically enslaved his three levels of the soul to the dark side? How would you know? Verse 54. הנה בכעסו ממש אדם יודע אותו, ויכירו מיהו. Through his anger. When a person is not in ease, and he's losing his balance, and he gets angry, however, he is not observing, keeping, holding on to his holy soul. He's allowing the anger to go without any boundaries. And when a person is allowing the anger to take over, we know he's not connected to the right path. We know because when you allow the anger to take over, with the anger comes the hatred. With the anger comes cruelty, disbelief, darkness, vicious thoughts and behavior. When you have that, you know that he lost his holy soul, because the holy soul cannot stay in a human body that is totally enslaved to the Amalek. And the result will be denying God, denying the coincidence in life, miracles, denying anything of godliness, divinity, and magic. The dark side, a foreign God, will dwell instead of the holy soul that departed. זהו האדם קרוי, זה עבד לריבונו, זהו האדם השלם. But a complete person is the one that won't allow that to happen. He won't allow that the soul, which is all about pleasance, it's all about love, it's all about awareness, it's all about appreciation, daily, momentarily, of God's presence in our life. It's two different worlds. When we see people, it doesn't matter in the name of what political movement or what religion, full of anger and dark cruelty, in the name of God, this is Amalek, because the result will be darkness, coldness, no devotion, no excitement with love for anything of connecting to real godly connection. So either the person is a whole shalem, when he keeps his soul, holy soul inside by not allowing the rage, the hatred, the separation to take over, not defiling his own soul. That's the whole person. Verse 55. ואם אדם הוא אינו שומר אותה, והוא עוקר קדושה זו העליונה מחמת שבא לידי כעס. And he uproots that holiness, that divine holiness from his own body, because he allows the hatred to take over. And he invites inside, unconsciously, sometimes consciously, another God, the power of darkness. ודאי זהו אדם שמרד באדונו. This person rebelled against his master, against the master of the universe. אסור לקרב אליו. Don't be close to him. ולהתחבר עמו. Don't be partner with him. וזהו טורף נפשו באפו. He is simply, it's hard to translate the Hebrew, טורף נפשו באפו, but he's basically destroying his soul with his rage. He's not really destroying the soul, but he's uprooting the soul, disconnecting from it. And that's why it says, "Chidlu lachem min adam asher neshama b'apo," that verse in Psalm that we spoke about before. Be careful, stay away from that person that uproots his soul with his rage. Because that kind of a person you don't want to be connected to. So whenever you see a person, that it doesn't matter for what religion or idea of even equality, but you look at that person and you see one thing: rage, anger, hatred, cruelty. He uprooted his soul. Yeah, he can cover it up with the slogans. In the slogan of equality, communism killed, murdered, destroyed the life of more than 100 million people that were murdered. What about so many, more than 100 million people? The people who were abused, enslaved in the name of what? Justice and equality. So, of course, people will follow the idea of equal rights and so on. But if you see the hatred, the cruelty, you know exactly who are we dealing with. We're dealing with Amalek. So that's why it says the war against Amalek. This is the Armageddon war that we are at right now. This is World War III. This is not a war. It looks like it's a war for economy, controlling on resources. It looks like it's a war for lands, it's a war for control. It's a war for who's with me, who's against me. It's not. This is just the cover up. The real war is the war against Amalek. And therefore, when we read Parashat Tetsaveh, there's a pinnacle of this, or the climax of this parasha. It starts with Ve'ata Tetzaveh et Bnei Israel, and the Zohar is saying that the grammatical structure in the beginning of this parasha is different than any other parasha in the Torah. It's like the grammar is very different. Usually it starts with, and God spoke to Moses, telling him, do this and this and this and this. Okay, here it says, Ve'ata tetzaveh, and you should order. All right, it's like hard to translate it. Ve'ata, it's one word, and you should. But the word ve'ata starts with, and it repeats itself many times. Ve'ata start with a vav and ends with a hey. In between, you have the word et. Et, you don't have a word like this in English. Et means in Hebrew from Aleph to Taf, from A to Z. Et, first letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph, the last is Taf. What does that mean? So when we read this parasha carefully, it speaks about the work of the high priest, which is very important. And as we said, since the temple has been destroyed less than 2,000 years ago, every person should become the priest of his own home. And lighting the eternal candle is the job of every person by prayers, by meditations, by charity. Every time you light your soul, as it says, Kineh Hashem Nishmat Adam. The human soul is God's candle. When you light the fire of your soul with excitement and love, appreciation, awe, and connection to godliness, and when you connect like the flame is going upwards, but it's still holding to the wick and the oil. The human soul is viable as long as it's one hand, it is in the body, on the other hand, it's soaring up to the heavens. As long as it does it, it's like the candle connecting the upper and lower. Now, then the Torah is speaking, so I'll explain about the Vav and the Hey and the Aleph Taf. It speaks about the clothes of the high priest. And the priest had 4 different clothes. And if it was a high priest, it's connected to the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey. If it was a simple priest, it connected to the name, God's name, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. Again, 4 letters, but this is the lower name. Connecting these 2 together, you get the connection of heaven and earth. If you know some. Now it speaks about the holy stones and the breastplate of the high priest, which is a symbol for connecting to God's messages. So we don't have the breastplate, but when we study, when we learn, when we pray, when we scan the 72 names that were connected to the 12 stones of the breastplate, we finally create that ability to rise above and receive God's messages. Okay? All of those parts come to the highest of them all. Exodus 28, verse 36. ועשית ציץ זהב טהור, ופיתחת לה פיתוחי חותם, קודש לאדוני. And you should make the tzitz. What was the tzitz? So the sages explained to us, the high priest had kind of a crown, but without the things coming out. It was just that plate on his forehead, and it was made of pure gold. And on that plate, the letters of the Tetragrammaton were written there. Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey. And it said, whoever rebelled against God, when he looked at the high priest, tzitz, he would be ashamed and do teshuvah and return to connection, which means, what is the Amalek state of mind? Rebelling against the creator of the universe, trying to deny his existence. And therefore, I can do whatever I want. Defile my holy soul till the soul leaves me and only nothingness stays behind. That's why, by the way, one of the biggest article in Parashah Tetsaveh in the Zohar is about the secret of the Tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton means the name of 4 letters. The name of 4 letters, Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey, that basically, as we said before, it's not the name of God. In the simple understanding, God has no name. He's infinite. And name is a definition. We are talking about the form of the 4 letters of the name of God is the purest form of connecting our minds to godliness through meditation, through realizing that when we meditate on the Yud, we are connecting to the highest level. It's like, as the Zohar explains somewhere else, this is where the spring comes out from the mountain. There's a spring of bliss that is coming out. And then the water come into a pool. That's the letter Hey. And then from the pool, the water go in kind of aqueducts into the different fields. And that's a Vav. That's why it looks like a pipe. Okay, the aqueduct, the letter Vav. And then the last Hey is the field, reality, the body, our needs, whatever we experience in this life. So what does it mean, teshuvah? Teshuvah, return the Hey. What does it mean? When a person is rebelling God, He disconnects from the Vav, disconnects from the network. Now he's on his own. Empty, void, darkness. What's left is emptiness, despair, darkness, disbelief, hopelessness, darkness, basically. So if you want an answer, why is it that we live in an era in which people are richer than ever in history? People eat much more. One of the big problems is obesity. People eat more than they need to, okay, because they have the access to so much food. Never in history we've been so comfortable and so blessed. Why is it that we are so depressed? The answer is when you kill, defile the soul inside in a religion of materialism, this is the story. And whenever you hear the hatred and the anger, stay away from it. Follow only pleasant love with one intention: to unite, to connect, to appreciate the simple moments of life, to appreciate humans' rights for happiness and freedom. This is truth. And that is through the connection to the Tetragrammaton, through the meditation about the Tetragrammaton, we train our minds, our brains, and our souls to bring in the light, the bliss, to feed our souls so we can be that whole person that feels that life is valuable. So we have to be really careful because Amalek is all over. Amalek is also thoughts within us. And we have to be very careful about strengthening the light of God through the study, especially the study of the Zohar, through meditation, especially meditating on the Tetragrammaton. You can find below a meditation, guided meditation that I created based on the ancient books, that you can train yourself how to connect daily to God's light, God, and bring in, invite your holy soul in. So that's the first stage of fighting the Amalek, winning Armageddon, and appreciating what you are. We have to remember, there's a big, big, horrible story since October 7th, 23. And the hostages being released, and they speak about the horrors that went through in the tunnels of Hamas. But one thing that comes out, that in the darkness of the tunnels, being chained into heavy chains, people come and say, but the only thing that let me live was faith. I was not a religious person before, but I realized without faith, without blessing every day, without saying Shema Israel every day, I won't be able to survive. Just in the darkness, when your soul starts to shine, this is the message of how can we survive in this Armageddon. We have to connect to faith. It's a matter of life and death. So if you take Emunah, Emunah is a connection. It's made of two words, Amen and Vav-Hey. Amen, Vav-Hey. That's Emunah. Ve'ata, the Zohar says that's the Vav and the Hey connecting together. That's the whole thing of Emunah, from A to Z. When we have Emunah, when we are working on that connection, when we scare away the darkness of the doubt and the hatred and the anger and the fear, replace them with love, with light, with connection. That is how we prepare ourselves to win that war, a final victory. God bless you. Thank you all.